In 1979, 20th Century Fox released Alien in theaters. Describing it as a slasher film in space does not adequately convey just how well it distinguishes itself as a horror film. With an artful visual identity and atmosphere crafted by Ridley Scott's direction, and H.R. Giger's perverse, unsettling designs, it was laden with disturbing, violent, and sexual metaphors that subverted typical slasher films of its era, and it established one of cinema's strongest protagonists in Ripley. Challenging gender norms in film, especially in horror and science fiction at the time, and Jerry Goldsmith's enveloping blend of both classical music and industrial horror in his score created a dichotomy of both fear and intrigue in every moment. Alien proved itself to be a science fiction film unlike any other, and it went on to be massively influential, with many artists taking influence from it, including a team at Nintendo who in the mid-1980s were developing a science fiction action-adventure game called Metroid. Though Yoshio Sakamoto, designer on the original game and director of Super Metroid, once stated in an interview that Alien had a huge influence on the first game, its influence extends far beyond just its creature designs and certain names for its characters being the same. Alien's DNA has been embedded in Metroid from its inception to the modern day, like an embryo. Metroid went on to become one of the most important games in the history of the medium, standing shoulder to shoulder with The Legend of Zelda, which was released the same year. But while Zelda came to be known for instilling curiosity and courage in the player, Metroid descended into isolation and unease. You weren't just solving its world, you were surviving it, much like Ellen Ripley aboard the Nostromo. This ended up being the guiding principle when crafting the world design of Metroid, imparting loneliness and desperation on the player unlike any other game of its era, in the same way Alien's isolation played a huge part in its brilliance. And when it comes to Ripley as a protagonist, she too had some influence on Samus Aran. When we are introduced to Ripley in the first film, she is the warrant officer aboard the Nostromo, and just another member of the crew. She is at first sworn to her duty, but develops into a pragmatic survivor and a symbol of courage and strength. In the sequel, Aliens, her experiences aboard the Nostromo are largely cast aside by those around her, until the unthinkable happens all over again, and the one person she finds comfort in, the one that she comes to protect like her own daughter, is Newt. In the end, Ripley proves herself as an absolute badass, not just a survivor, but a warrior, and a sort of mother figure to Newt. These elements that cemented Ripley as a character would become foundational to Samus Aran. In this video, I wanted to discuss the elements that brought Metroid to life, specifically through the original game and Super Metroid. I wanted to highlight the ways in which Alien influenced its creation, and how it continued to influence it. How Metroid established its protagonist, its world, its design, and why I absolutely love it to death. If The Legend of Zelda wasn't my favorite series from Nintendo, it would be Metroid, because it contains not just a lot of what I love about games, but a lot of what I love about all art forms, all presented through the visor of one of this medium's greatest characters. Despite her extravagant actions, Samus is still human, and these games make that clear through the unlikely bond she forms with a baby Metroid. I'm Liam Triforce, and this video is the first in a series about Metroid. Let's start with the first game. When Metroid first released for the Famicom Disk System, its score proved itself to be unlike anything ever conceived for a game at that point. Extremely evocative of Ennio Morricone's opening theme for The Thing, it opens with this sinister, pulsing accompaniment in the background, and an echoing, hopeless melody that immediately instills an apprehension over what is to come. But soon enough, it comes into its own. Amidst the hopelessness, hope returns. Withholding any sense of hope or empowerment is a technique that Metroid utilizes in its soundtrack to the fullest extent. The score for Metroid was composed by Hirokazu Tanaka, later known for his work on Earthbound. And alongside the labyrinthine structure of the game, it was one of the earliest games of its kind to make the player feel utterly alone and desperate. When you enter Brinstar, you can feel a triumphant march pushing you forward, but the further you get into Zebes, the sooner any hope is removed from the equation. Kraid's lair gives you this spiraling melody, one that is instantly memorable for the way it instills anxiety, and it perfectly captures the confusing, spiraling layout of the area. Norfair is elegant in how uneasy it can make you feel, and Norfair itself is massive, with layers upon layers of linear stretches that connect to vertical tunnels, most of which look quite similar. Ridley's lair has this maddening theme that repeats over and over again, clawing its way inside of your head, and it accompanies a level that is comparatively straightforward, but the road ahead is long and arduous. It can take a while to finally reach Ridley. Any semblance of hope is withheld the more you descend, and the game does its damnedest to ensure you get lost along the way. The point of all of this is that Metroid's atmosphere, designed to create a sense of isolation and confusion, is crafted through two inseparable elements: music and level design. Precisely because the game is a giant, hopeless maze, it is compelling to play through. At the time, there weren't many games that aimed to make the player feel as anxious or despondent, leaning into the horror genre and how the game is set up. There were a handful of Japanese horror games for personal computers at the time, including a game blatantly inspired by Alien to the point of using Nostromo as the name for the ship. But even though Metroid is not a horror game by nature, many elements of its design make it feel intimidating. Aside from the clear path to your left that unlocks the Morph Ball, Brinstar immediately presents multiple paths with no clear direction of which way is the right way. Various items, all strewn about on different paths, are key to descending further into Zebes, and in order to obtain those items, you might first need to find other items like the Power Bomb or some missiles or the Ice Beam. There's also the Varia suit, which you definitely don't want to miss with the plentiful amounts of lava abound. Only once you have all of these things will you be adequately prepared to tackle the other portions of Zebes, and as mentioned, they do not let up on the confusion. Norfair is where the bulk of the game will inevitably take place. It is ridiculously big in comparison to Brinstar, and its two separate levels of elevation are separated by a giant, vertical tunnel on the east side, meaning that if you need to get back up to Brinstar, you'll have to embark on a long journey through many rooms you've already been through just to reach that tunnel. This is where the last of the major upgrades reside, including the high jump boots, the wave beam, and the screw attack. And there are plenty of missiles and energy tanks to find. Kraid's lair has that aforementioned dizzying roundabout design, and multiple paths in it lead absolutely nowhere. There are so many other paths that will take you to a few missile tanks, or perhaps even an energy tank if you're lucky, but other than that, they don't get you any closer to Kraid, meaning you'll have to backtrack and hope you've memorized your positioning in this giant maze full of doors. It also doesn't help that so many of these rooms can look identical, and you're asked to pay attention to minute details in each room in order to know exactly where you are. Pair this with the low amount of health you start with, the fact that it doesn't ever fill all the way when you continue from death, even after you have energy tanks collected, the relentless enemies that spawn, the hazards and platforming you'll have to overcome, and it's no wonder that many people in the modern day bounce off of this game. But the bold, almost lawless ways in which it evokes these emotions are what make it so special. Even now, there isn't another Metroid game quite like it, because they have since been designed in such a way that they feel possible to solve from the onset. Their worlds gradually expand as you acclimate to them, and we'll talk more about that with Super Metroid. Either way, it becomes apparent quickly that solving Metroid is going to be a monumental task. Of course, you could argue that the original Zelda tried its damnedest not to hold your hand either, what with its wide-open, non-linear manner of overworld exploration, asking players to consult the manual for a general idea on how to get started, and Metroid does this in its manual too to some extent. Lots of games in the 80s were like that, and you'd be lucky if any supplementary material provided with the game was able to help you out. But while Zelda has focused labyrinths, ones designed to be charted with specific items, and ones where you can even find maps of the entire layout, Metroid is a giant sprawling labyrinth that you have to chart yourself, with dead ends, backtracking, and memorization being your best friend. This makes the original Metroid a distinct experience from the rest of the series, as nothing about it is designed to help you out. You are dropped in and asked to explore and survive. The horror comparison is apt, as scavenging for resources and hoping you don't make a wrong turn when trying to get from point A to point B in a giant labyrinth would become integral to the survival horror genre in the 90s with Alone in the Dark and Resident Evil. The genre uses resource management to create tension as you try not to spend too much ammo or healing items dealing with enemies, and its map design forced you to take routes and do things that you really didn't want to. But you had to. The root of all survival horror, if you ask me. Much like those games, in Metroid, you have to be smart to survive. Much like the original Zelda, wherein note-taking can be invaluable to memorization of the world, creating a map as you go in Metroid is the only way you'll be able to figure out what you're doing on your first playthrough. Here is the map I created of Brinstar, for example. I could always refer back to this if I ever got stuck. I mean, you could simply look up a full detailed map of the game that tells you exactly where to go, or if you want an experience authentic to the time period, you could consult Nintendo Power. But the trade-off there is that you're not really exploring Zebes to the fullest extent. Though I could understand if you didn't care. Maps that chart the terrain as we go, as well as full maps that you can discover in the game world, have become commonplace in games of this genre because they simply make playing them more enjoyable, without losing out on that sense of discovery. Again, this also makes the original Metroid feel distinct, but certainly less approachable in the modern day. Coupled with the game having so many accessible paths, yet with so many of them leading to areas that you probably won't be able to access without specific upgrades in your arsenal, it is quite easy to get frustrated and lost. But with enough patience, it is entirely possible to solve it on your own. Along the same train of thought, while the original Metroid's rooms often look and feel identical in aesthetics and layout, these prove to be a blessing when hunting for shortcuts and secrets. For example, once you know that you can bomb and shoot out certain floors, walls, and ceilings, looking for possible spots to do so is a lot more manageable, and certain rooms contain shortcuts in the same exact spots, meaning that the game recycles these rooms to give you an easy shortcut in a completely different part of the map. Once you know that you can drop through lava, perhaps by falling in accidentally or just being curious, you'll begin to try falling into lava more often, especially in areas where there aren't long stretches of lava, and after you acquire the Varia suit, since the risk is mitigated. This is the foundation of Metroid right here. It's just that the game doesn't really condition you to think about the world in the same way future games do. It all comes from your own intuition. Of course, as much as I respect this game, I concede to its many faults. Things that I might have said give the game a distinct atmosphere, like its open-ended level design that wants you to get lost a lot of the time, and its resource farming, are still, at the end of the day, frustrating to deal with for a lot of people. I'm not sure if respawning with 30 HP each time was a technical limitation or something, but unless you know exactly where an extra energy tank is to top off your health, you're gonna need to farm for a while to fill your health and missiles. And the funny thing about this is that enemies will stop dispensing supplies after a certain point. You'll have to exit and re-enter a room for them to start dropping stuff again. Speaking of which, you can only have 6 energy tanks at any given time. There are more than 6 energy tanks in Metroid, and each additional one you collect will only refill your health. This is in stark contrast to the original Zelda, where each heart container in the game would increase your total health, and there were no extras to speak of. I also don't think the bosses and enemy patterns are always winners. Kraid, for example, has this weird, relentless pattern that I honestly never attempt to learn. And yes, that is Kraid. He used to be so tiny. Anyway, I just ignore the pattern entirely. After freezing his thorns in place, I just run up, say my goodbyes, and pump his stomach full of missiles. If anything, the energy tank here is more difficult to obtain, though at this point I don't think I had either the high jump boots or the Varia suit, so that might have been my problem. To be fair, I've gone on about this already. You can go to either Kraid's Lair or Norfair pretty much right as soon as you've discovered the elevators to each area, though your mileage may vary without any upgrades. But hey, I beat Kraid. The Ridley fight is much better. Both of these bosses just kind of dump a ton of free missiles on you, to the point where exploring for missile tanks becomes less of a necessity. During the early game, they're essential, but once you've defeated at least one of these bosses, you'll be set for a long while. At least, until you reach Torian. In order to operate the elevator to Torian, the lair of Mother Brain, you'll need to defeat each of the game's bosses and return to Brinstar. From here, you'll finally encounter the game's titular monster, the Metroids. They'll latch onto you and absorb your health, and the only way to break free is to bomb them continuously. There is an easier way of dealing with them, but you're meant to realize this yourself. Unlike future games in the Metroid series, your beam upgrades do not combine to create unique effects, nor can you turn them on or off. So if you acquired the Wave Beam and thought it was a permanent upgrade, only to get your shit rocked by a group of Metroids, you're in for a rude awakening. As it turns out, it is pretty much necessary for you to reacquire the Ice Beam at one of the Chozo statues you obtain it from, in order for it to be even remotely possible to clear this area. Once you've done that, you can finally freeze the Metroids and kill them all together if you fire a few missiles at them once they're frozen. The way Metroids behave are unmistakably similar to the facehuggers from Alien. Granted, they don't reproduce by leaving an embryo inside of a human host, but the way they latch onto you, and the resulting panic I feel as I attempt to force it off of me before all of my health is gone, is highly reminiscent of the panic and discomfort of the facehugger latching itself onto Kane in the film. In fact, a lot of Torian reminds me heavily of the final act of Alien, and from here we'll be mentioning it a lot. There have been similarities throughout the game, and not just because the game makes players feel anxious. Ridley, for example, is an obvious homage to Ridley Scott, the director of Alien, but he also carries a lot of visual similarities to the titular Alien. While his head isn't nearly as phallic as the Xenomorphs, it is still elongated and cylindrical, and Ridley also towers over this game's protagonist just as the Xenomorph does with Ripley. He has that same visible ribcage and that long tail with the sharp end. While he certainly takes visual influence from Alien, his relationship with Samus becomes even more symbolic of the dynamic between Ripley and the Xenomorph in Super Metroid. At any rate, Metroid continues its withdrawal of hope into Torian, with music that feels like a living, breathing part of the world. There's this bubbling sound throughout Torian, a diegetic sound representative of the disgusting blend of organic and mechanical life that sits at the heart of the planet, Mother Brain. Diegetic music is core to Metroid's identity, really. Most of Metroid's music is written to feel like it exists as an extension of the world, as if the walls and floors could sing. The item room theme, for example, builds so much anticipation for what the item might be at the end of the tunnel, and its discordant beeps and blips and strange bubbling accompaniment feels perfectly evocative of this mystery, while still carrying the horror roots of Metroid. Back to Torian, the music gets even more intense as you enter the room Mother Brain resides in. The fight with Mother Brain is by far the best in the game. Not only are you cracking the glass that contains Mother Brain and firing away at her, but you're also avoiding the projectiles from the room itself, which come out frequently and will mess up your pattern. All of Torian is an extension of Mother Brain herself. The entire area is out to get you, and it won't stop until you are dead. It's here where I was reminded of just how beautiful the simple act of jumping and shooting can be. It's not as tight as, say, Mega Man, but I'd taken what I'd learned throughout the entire game into the fight with Mother Brain. It's a difficult fight, but incredibly rewarding. Mother Brain's name is another obvious reference to Alien, specifically the Nostromo's computer. In the film, the computer relays transmissions from the company about their new directive upon discovery of the alien being aboard the ship. The crew is tasked with taking it back alive under any circumstances, even if it costs them their lives. It becomes quite clear that Mother was at no point on their side. And yet, she is the beating heart of the Nostromo, sending logs to the company and flying the ship as the crew remain in hypersleep. She is the brain of the ship that serves as a death trap for most of the crew throughout the film, knowingly allowing all of this to take place at the demands of the company. Mother Brain is similar in that she is the heart and mind of the planet she lives on, breeding Metroids to conquer all of space. And that's why she has to die. Upon killing Mother Brain, Metroid subverts expectations by having one more surprise in store for you. You have to escape before the planet blows up with you on it. Only now, in this desperate escape, does the score for the game return to instilling hope and courage. Though aware of the present danger, the piece still feels motivating and triumphant, as if to encourage you to make one final push. You're almost there. Don't mess this up. Both Alien and its sequel ended with sequences like this, becoming some of the most intense, nail-biting portions of either film. In Alien specifically, Ripley initiates the self-destruct sequence, but then she finds herself going back for the cat Jones, before running for the shuttle, exiting the ship, and hoping to God the alien has been blown into space for good. What's more is that the sequence subverts your expectations still, just as the escape sequence in Metroid does by simply existing out of nowhere. And just when Ripley is at her most vulnerable, after going to such extreme lengths in the intense heat of the ship, just when you think it's over, it's not. This would become a staple of the Metroid series. While future attempts wouldn't carry the surprise of the original sequence, they still proved to be extremely effective each and every time, as you are likely exhausted from fighting the final boss, and yet the threat of death still looms over you. Once you finally make it out, the game rolls the credits, set to a beautiful, celebratory piece of music, and it's here where Metroid's most famous moment takes place. If you manage to beat the game under a certain period of time, it is revealed that Samus is actually a woman. This reveal follows an entire game wherein Samus is shown blasting aliens in space like a badass, making this reveal hit that much harder. Throughout the entirety of the game, there is no indication of her gender. In fact, the English instruction manual even keeps this fact hidden by referring to her with masculine pronouns. Most people in the 80s would have assumed she was a male character, just like all of the other video game protagonists of the time. After all, women were usually the reward back then. Peach in Super Mario Bros., Princess Zelda, Daphne in Dragon's Lair. Samus broke new ground in a predominantly male-oriented medium by demonstrating through her actions that she could do everything her male contemporaries could. Though Samus's existence as a female protagonist would not be the first for a video game altogether, it no doubt became noteworthy because of how gracefully it was handled, with its secrecy until the end of the game, allowing Samus to shine for who she is and what she's capable of. Samus and Ripley are both incredible characters in that regard. Going back to Ripley's place in Alien, it is not made apparent that she will be the sole survivor. She is just one of the crew, much like many slasher films of the era, like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and her being the sole survivor is not a given. In the end, she survives and outsmarts what is a very intelligent creature. She proves herself to the audience. Her and Samus are quite similar, and it's no wonder that they have endured as icons of their respective art forms. At any rate, this brings us to the end of the original Metroid. Though undeniably flawed, it was groundbreaking for many reasons, including its portrayal of Samus, its open-ended design, and its gameplay concepts. I mean, looking back, it's no wonder the Ice Beam became a staple of the series. Not only does it freeze enemies, but you can use those enemies as platforms to reach different parts of the map. This is an inventive concept on its own, giving the platforming of Metroid more complexity, but it is especially incredible to bear witness to in a game from the 80s. Also, with every playthrough of Metroid, you become more knowledgeable about its mechanics and layout. Equipped with knowledge of where you need to go, you can cut out lengthy, unnecessary routes and chart out an optimal path. The more you play, the better you'll get at jumping and shooting, which means you'll be more accurate with your shots, and it feels amazing to play any Metroid game well. You might even find ways to go beyond the intentions of the designers using the abilities at your disposal, thanks to the non-linear setup of the world, and the ways in which you can apply the tools at your disposal. This is the kind of thing that makes this series so beautiful, as each playthrough seemingly brings with it a wealth of new observations that you can apply to subsequent playthroughs. On top of that, the games are short, inviting, immersive, and fun as hell to play. A recipe for success, and it's no wonder the genre took off. All Metroid really needed from here to improve on its foundation was a proper solidification of its mechanics and level design. As mentioned earlier, it needed a streamlined map that gradually opens up as your knowledge of the game expands. It needed proper organic tutorials to its mechanics. Beyond that, anything and everything was possible in narrative, design, or structure. Metroid had a whole universe of possibilities to explore, and those possibilities would be realized on the Super Nintendo. But first, a brief detour with Metroid 2. I have plans to discuss Metroid 2 and its legacy in depth in a future video, so I'll be brief here. Metroid 2 was developed by a lot of the original team, and it is by all means a good game, but it also doesn't really solve many of the original game's problems, instead exacerbating them through the limitations of the hardware. Seeing as it is a Game Boy game, it is even harder to tell where exactly you are once you delve deeper into the world, even if you play the game with color. There also isn't any sort of map once again, and while you can just make your own as you might have done with the original Metroid, this is a little more difficult if you're playing the game on the go, which is what the Game Boy was designed for. These problems are brought to the forefront due to the game's premise of Samus having to eradicate every single Metroid on their home planet, SR388, meaning you'll have to be quite thorough in your exploration. Thankfully, there is a distinct shift in ambience when a Metroid is nearby, so you can use that to aid you in your hunt. I have a lot more to say about Metroid 2 as I've said, because despite all of this, I do believe it is a good game. It introduced the Spider Ball and Spring Ball to the series, allowing you to cling to walls with the Morph Ball and jump without the use of a bomb, respectively, as well as new beams for Samus's arm cannon, and its grayscale presentation necessitated changes to Samus's armor once she acquired the Varia suit, as they could no longer simply change the armor's color. These changes have become a mainstay since. Also, I think its use of audio, particularly as a game mechanic, creates some diegetic sounds that remind me heavily of why I loved Torian's atmosphere in the original Metroid. Despite the game's limitations, it has a distinct atmosphere that draws me in every time I play it. But I'll save further discussion for another time. The most important thing of note from Metroid 2 is its ending, as according to a 2010 interview with Metroid designer Yoshio Sakamoto, development on Super Metroid was predicated on his fondness for that ending. Samus finally manages to kill the Queen Metroid, yet another reference to the Alien films in which Ripley is locked in mortal combat with the Queen of the Xenomorphs at the end of Aliens. While this might just seem like a cute reference in and of itself, it's what comes after that solidifies a connection to the films, and it begins to characterize Samus beyond just being a stoic vessel for the player. By this point, Samus's mission is practically complete. Every Metroid has been eradicated, and all she has to do at this point is get the hell out. But on the way, she runs into an egg, and from it hatches a baby Metroid that latches onto Samus as if she were its mother. Despite her mission being to kill every last Metroid, this little Metroid has no perception of who it is or what it is meant to do, and Samus allows it to guide her back to her ship as the two of them escape, betraying her original objective in order to preserve the life of this creature. A beautiful moment that would pave the way for Samus's relationship with this creature, one inspired by the connection between Ripley and Newt in Aliens. Super Metroid would allow this bond to transform into something of its own, but both it and Aliens portray the same thing: a mother going to the furthest lengths to protect her child. This sequence speaks louder than my own words ever could. The pans across the lab, the abrupt cuts that introduce the game, and the eerie music all set the stage for Super Metroid being totally distinct for its era. An action game that you can feel in every sense. One that you are happy to get lost in. One that can make your skin crawl. One that thrives on an immaculate sense of atmosphere through a perfect storm of gameplay, graphics, and sound. We've talked about the fact that sound is such an important element to Metroid, and Super Metroid really hammers that point home. Kenji Yamamoto was selected as this game's composer, along with Minako Hamano. Both would remain with the series through to the latest entry, Metroid Dread. And I'm not surprised because their work on Super Metroid is some of the finest in any game on the Super Nintendo. It is so good that it transcends the chip it was developed for, much like Donkey Kong Country or Chrono Trigger. Thanks to the Super Nintendo's 8 audio channels and the capabilities of sample playback, Super Metroid has much richer audio design. And when you consider the fact that Kenji Yamamoto was also this game's overall sound programmer, And he created sound effects specifically for the game. This meant that he had free reign to create the game's oral identity how he saw fit. The little chirps that the baby Metroid makes in the intro and throughout the game were created by him, a sound that balances both the creepy, otherworldly setting and one that makes the baby Metroid feel defenseless compared to the Metroid Samus fought in the previous games. Though, as I'm sure you know, it wouldn't be defenseless forever.
The last Metroid is in captivity. The galaxy is at peace.
That is Dan Owsen's voice, by the way, known for translating and writing the English scripts for multiple Nintendo games in the 90s, including A Link to the Past, Link's Awakening, Star Fox, Ocarina of Time, and this game. Together, Kenji Yamamoto and Minako Hamano arranged music from the original Metroid, as evident from the Return of the Metroid theme, and they also created all new music specifically for Super Metroid. One of these pieces is Samus's theme, a song that usually sets the stage for any Metroid game going into it, and it is a masterpiece. A triumphant piece that balances Samus's arrival as a character through the drums and lead melody, and the universe she exists in through the tense undercurrent of the synths and the choir. This accompanies Samus's first opening monologue in the history of the series. Though Samus is primarily a silent protagonist, she introduces the game in first person, giving us a glimpse into the person in the suit. Given that I am such a huge fan of Metroid 2's ending, I love seeing Samus's state of mind every now and then, while the rest of her character is presented through gameplay. Though this monologue doesn't give nearly as much insight into who she is as future games in the series, particularly Metroid Fusion, it still serves as a beautiful transition into the game's introductory sequence. Samus's monologue is as follows.
I first battled the Metroids on planet Zebes. It was there that I foiled the plans of the space pirate leader Motherbrain to use the creatures to attack galactic civilization. Next, I fought the Metroids on their homeworld, SR-388. I completely eradicated them, except for a larva, which after hatching followed me like a confused child. I personally delivered it to the Galactic Research Station on Ceres, so scientists could study its energy-producing qualities. The scientists' findings were astounding. They discovered that the powers of the Metroid might be harnessed for the good of civilization. Satisfied that all was well, I left the station to seek a new bounty to hunt. But I had hardly gone beyond the asteroid belt when I picked up a distress signal. Ceres Station was under attack.
Samus hurries to the research station, only to stumble upon the same sights we first laid eyes upon at the title screen. The entire station is soaked in an eerie blue tinge, it's dead silent save for the humming of the station's emergency power, and a faint alarm sounding somewhere. And you can even stumble past the corpses of the scientists that happen to be watching over the baby Metroid. Interestingly enough, the baby Metroid seems to be in the next room over, unharmed. It's here where Ridley would truly become a rival to Samus, and that rivalry would endure through the rest of the franchise's history. Technically speaking, the Prime series established itself as the first chronological return of Ridley, but in terms of the series' release history, this was the first time we saw Ridley again. And it also remains one of my favorites due to the context surrounding it. Samus put the life of this baby Metroid over her mission before, and now she is facing the consequences of her own selflessness, much like Ripley doing anything she can to protect Newt. And while Ridley was nothing more than a freaky little guy in the NES game, he is utterly creepy with the extra detail afforded by the Super Nintendo. The distinguishing features that made Ridley's design so creepy in the first place are fully realized here, from the sharp beak, the eye, the weird neck, and the long tail that he actually uses as a weapon to skewer Samus. This fight also introduces us to Ridley's theme for the first time, composed by Minako Hamano, an intense, urgent piece of music that would become a staple of the franchise for years to come. This sequence is also an excellent example of interactive storytelling, something that Super Metroid gracefully executes throughout. Samus is ultimately helpless to stop Ridley from abducting the baby Metroid, and after your health reaches a certain point, Ridley will fly away with it and the station will be set to self-destruct. As the player, you can only flail around and hope that you can kill Ridley, not knowing if you are going to live or die. From there, you'll be met with an escape sequence, and one this early in the game is not only anxiety-inducing, in spite of how small the station is, but it also serves as a silent tutorial on the game's platforming and movement, because the stakes are high when you have no knowledge of how to play the game well. With nowhere else to turn after the abduction of the baby Metroid, Samus once again finds herself on the surface of Zebes. From the moment you land in Crateria, the atmosphere is palpable. It's pouring rain and the thunder crackling in the background is a part of the score. Another example of Metroid's diegetic music at work, blending seamlessly into the world. There's a faint, low choir audible too, along with accompaniment that rises quickly in volume before fading out again. It is such an unsettling ambience to introduce Zebes to the player, though familiar elements will return as you begin your descent. Once you head to the first elevator room, you might notice that the walls and floors look just like those item rooms from the first game, and at the bottom of the elevator, you'll be in a blue tunnel that is unmistakably the same as the one you enter the first game in. And if your memory serves you right, the Morph Ball upgrade should be on your left. Thus begins your journey. Even though this area carries familiar elements from the first game, its design is far more deliberate in giving players a concrete path, so that they actually have somewhat of an idea of where they are going and what they are capable of. Much like the first game, this room has a floor that can be destroyed for an alternate path, only this time you don't need bombs, you just need to jump and shoot beneath your feet to create a path. And this is necessary because you'll need missiles to open those red doors. At the end of the path, more missiles, and with nowhere else left to go, you can head back up to the elevator to investigate some of the areas you had to skip, equipped with new knowledge. This is a much more positive feeling than when you were turned away in the original Metroid, because that game is entirely non-linear from the moment you start playing, meaning you'd have to hope you memorize the exact location of where you can use your new upgrade. Here, you are learning of ways to unlock previously inaccessible areas through calculated design, and the game gradually opens itself up from there. This is exciting, and what do you know? Since you're taking a linear path back to Crateria, the game gives you space pirates to fight, complete with a shift in music and atmosphere. You have to platform your way back up the shaft you once fell down, all while fighting off space pirates, giving you another chance to practice with Samus's controls, kinda like those vertical tunnels in the original game, but with far more purpose. When investigating the areas you once had to pass up, you'll be able to save your game, and download map data for Crateria, which will encourage you to explore any pathways you might not have filled in, and since heading east won't do you much good with your current arsenal, you'll have to head west. But oops, you can't get through this wall of debris. Instead, you'll have to check out the Morph Ball passage that you had to cross over before, and from there you'll find a Chozo statue that will give you your bombs. And just when you think you're ready to head back, the door locks in your face before the Chozo statue comes to life and starts attacking you. Much like the Ridley fight, the game traps you and forces you to use what you've learned so far to survive a one-on-one battle before you can proceed any further. This fight can also be pretty intense if you don't know how to wall jump yet, or you can't figure out any other ways of countering its patterns with your movement. But the gameplay loop of jumping and shooting a weak point is imperative to finishing a Metroid game, so you'd best settle in. Despite Crateria being so small, it conveys so much without it feeling as linear as it is. All you are thinking about as the player is exactly what the game is teaching you. You are finding the keys to each lock and using them, all while getting to grips with Samus's controls and abilities, and the simplicity of that loop never changes throughout the entire game, even if the layout of the world gets more complex. The difference is that the game gradually expands as your knowledge increases, thus creating the foundation for an entire genre, and doing so with such finesse that it still remains one of the finest in the genre to this day, even as the progenitor. It's not just the design though, it's the attention to detail in its atmosphere, and we'll talk about all of that more as we go along. Along the path laid out for you, you'll encounter the first energy tank, giving you an additional 100 health. This isn't like the original Metroid either. There are 14 energy tanks in this game, and you can carry all 14 of them at once. Plus, there are even reserve tanks you can find and refill that will replenish your health when you lose it all. In addition to that energy tank, you'll also spot the room that leads to Torian. Much like the first game, you'll have to defeat all of the game's bosses in order to gain entry. There's Ridley and Kraid once again, but there are also 2 other goobers that are newcomers to Zebes. For now though, this is a dead end. With the knowledge you have accrued, all you can do now is head west to the elevator and enter Brinstar. Brinstar's theme in the original game was exciting and triumphant. It was the only piece of music like it until the defeat of Mother Brain, with the exception of the jingle that plays when you obtain a key item. Knowing this, your arrival in Brinstar is met with an appropriately upbeat and absolutely unforgettable piece of music. The music fading in as Samus rides the elevator into Brinstar still gives me goosebumps. The percussion is all built off of the aesthetic of these jungle vines permeating the entire area. You've got this techno melody as the bass line of the whole piece, bringing to mind the technological invasion of the planet's natural sights. And these 2 things are perfectly evocative of the action in Super Metroid, while the choir and synth accompaniment are meant to symbolize the exploration of Brinstar and the mysteries it holds. Action and exploration go hand in hand in Metroid, and they are harmoniously gathered in an absolute banger of a track. Brinstar's design at a glance seems to guide you eastward, but it also has so many secrets and alternate paths that you can play around with. Rooms with unique challenges that can reward you with missiles and whatnot. It doesn't branch off too much, and it won't take you in multiple directions, but it will show you what is possible and impossible with your current moves. Well, impossible if you don't know how to preserve your jump momentum with the Morph Ball to get an early super missile. There's also this massive vertical shaft in the center with so many of its secrets to unearth, including the Charge Beam, which allows you to charge your shots to land more powerful attacks. And you'll also have a boss fight with Botwoon, who just loves to create spores and hide his weak point from you. This is where you'll learn that combing different areas and shooting and bombing suspicious places to find missiles will serve you well in defeating bosses quickly, especially this one. No one likes waiting around in a boss fight. Funnily enough, because I obtained the early super missile, there was no need for me to actually fight this boss in order to finish the game. I only did it because I was going for 100% items. After descending further into Brinstar, you'll be removed from the green jungle aesthetic and thrust into an area decorated in red sand, indicating that you might be getting closer to the planet's core. To accompany this shift in atmosphere, we get what is unquestionably my favorite piece of music in the history of Metroid. It elicits the core of the series. It is simultaneously disquieting and attractive. It just feels like you aren't meant to be where you are. For a Super Nintendo piece, its wide range and volume makes it so unsettling, and yet I can't get enough of it. It acts as a symbol of just how far you've descended, and appropriately too, as you're encouraged to keep going down. You might be able to cleanly wall jump between these guys without the ice beam if you're a god, and you can get an early spazer beam right here by being proficient in wall jumping, but no matter how cool you are, you'll still have to end up falling deeper into Zebes. Even so, there are tons of possibilities for reaching areas early with a limited arsenal in this game, thanks to the fact that Samus's innate capabilities are so well implemented. For one thing, there's Samus's aforementioned wall jump. Though it is conveyed in-game by one of a few animals indigenous to the planet Zebes, another one of these animals teaches you how to shine spark, there is a good chance you might figure out how to do this on your own. And it can be one of the most powerful tools in Samus's kit, not just for dealing with enemies, but also for climbing to heights normally impossible without upgrades like the high jump boots, ice beam, shine spark, grapple beam, or space jump. There's also the art of bomb jumping, which can take practice, but if you're ever spamming bombs on the ground, you might notice that Samus gets a second jump when a bomb is placed in midair. With a good sense of timing, you can climb pretty much anywhere, going beyond the need for walls when wall jumping. Truthfully, when you know where everything is in the game, much like the original, you can beat it fairly quickly. The only firm progression gates are item-based, but those items can be obtained in a variety of ways as you go along. In the elevator room, you might notice a room off to the side. Normally you need the high jump boots, but with a well-timed wall jump or a bomb jump, if that's more to your liking, you can head into that room off to the side and deal with Kraid without having to go to Norfair first to get the high jump boots. Which is more optimal for any run, as it doesn't require any extraneous upgrades if you know how to wall jump well, and you can clean up that subsection of Brinstar in one go. Before you enter Kraid's boss room, you'll notice the corpse of a Federation soldier, one of the only instances in Super Metroid where you'll see another human being, the other being scientists in the intro. At this point, you're beginning to expect something huge, as these doors become a recurring theme, appearing before every major boss in the game. And you'd be right, because Kraid is pretty big here. I guess all of those missiles I fed him in the first game helped him grow big and strong. And also much creepier. Not just in his design, but when he opens his mouth you can see slimy strands of saliva as he roars. Kraid also stands up after a certain point, in which you realize that Kraid is much bigger now than you might have thought initially. This transforms the boss into a platforming challenge as well, one that still carries the spirit of the original fight as you attempt to land missiles in Kraid's mouth. It's a great fight as both a revisitation of Kraid and as a test of everything you've learned. In Norfair, you'll be introduced to the high jump boots, the Varia suit for surviving much hotter areas, the ice beam for freezing enemies and platforms to create new paths for yourself, as well as new upgrades like the speed booster for blasting through terrain, the shine spark for launching yourself upwards to hidden areas, and the power bomb for nuking everything on screen and opening specific doors. You can also combine your beam upgrades for different effects, making the Spazer and ice beams you've acquired an absolute menace when paired up, and you still have yet to uncover the wave beam. All of these upgrades are strewn about Norfair, which has this layered, interconnected design, but is also much less inconvenient than NES Norfair, as it has multiple paths that link up to other paths, so long as you have the map and you know where to look. All of these upgrades end up being necessary for other upgrades in Norfair, meaning the entire area ends up being one big puzzle box, one without a clear path like in Brinstar, meaning it's up to you to solve it yourself by exploring. And you'll be doing all of this while the incredible atmosphere of this hellish red region of the planet seeps in, teeming with lava and other dangerous factors, but mostly defined by its sinister music. It flourishes in its simplicity, being made up of this low roar, which I always found emblematic of the lava or the sweltering heat of the planet's core, a simple repetitious synth beat, a low drum hit, and an occasional choir to tie it all together. It wouldn't be out of place in a horror game, and it paints a horrifically vivid picture of just how tense Norfair is meant to feel, all without dissuading you from exploring. God, I love Metroid. After acquiring all of these upgrades, toward the bottom of Upper Norfair, you'll find yourself face to face with a boss called Crocomire. The idea here is to not let Crocomire back you into a corner, instead landing as many shots as you can in its mouth to push it back. Eventually he'll stumble onto a frail bridge and fall straight through. It's here where you'll bear witness to what is probably the most harrowing death in Metroid history. As Crocomire shakes and roars in pain, its flesh, eyeballs, and tongue all dissolve and melt away due to the heat of the lava, leaving nothing behind but a skeleton. You watch Crocomire lose its flesh to the lava gradually, which is quite disturbing. Either way, it seemed like an easy fight, didn't it? Well, that's because you're not quite done. The door is locked, and at the wall of spikes, Crocomire's still conscious skeleton bursts through before it crumbles to the ground, leaving nothing behind but a pile of bones. I think Crocomire's entire sequence is one of Metroid's finest examples of horror to this day. Not just due to its excellent fake-out, but also its unusual setup as a boss fight, and the fact that you are forced to watch as this thing's flesh peels away. Either way, this leads you to obtaining the grapple beam, which means, among other things, you can explore the wrecked ship that lay to the east of Samus's ship in Crateria. Though yet again, with a well-executed series of jumps, you could get there early. The wrecked ship is unique, as when you enter, there is no power going to it, and its music isn't reflective of any organic life. Instead, it accurately portrays the feeling of being trapped in a dark, giant metal tomb, as ghostly and technological figures come to life in this area as you explore. It feels like Metroid's equivalent of a giant haunted house, to the point of its major boss being this creepy alien ghost that shoots blue fireballs with eyeballs in them. One thing I love about Super Metroid is that each of its major areas feel completely distinct in both design and atmosphere. Obviously, each area feels distinct to go through thanks to their visual design, music, and enemies, but something equally, if not more important, is the map design, and Super Metroid is excellent at creating a balanced progression in map complexity, all accompanied by that same descent into anxiety that the first game did so well. As mentioned, Crateria and Upper Brinstar guided players into the game through its straightforward but educational design, before Lower Brinstar forces players further into Zebes, but also has plenty of opportunities for emergent gameplay and secret hunting, just as Upper Brinstar did. Then Norfair comes with its complex interconnected design, but one that is a lot of fun to solve, even if your progress through it can feel non-linear. Finally, there's the wrecked ship, which places you in this claustrophobic box, a stark contrast to Norfair, but a welcome one. Of course, subsequent Metroid games understood how to diversify the design of each of its areas, but it's rare that one so effortlessly guides the player into becoming better at exploring the world. Super Metroid's progression makes it so that I always feel like I can acclimate to the game, no matter how long ago my last playthrough was. And on top of that, there are so many different ways to approach the game thanks to Samus's aforementioned flexibility in her movement and upgrades, and very rarely does the map ever feel annoying to backtrack through. Super Metroid also provides a stark contrast to the other game that proved foundational for Metroidvanias, Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Excellent game, of course, but it is also fucking massive, and it branches off at like every turn. I have to be in a mood to conquer Dracula's castle, and to be fair, I was quite recently. I played Aria of Sorrow a little while ago, that was a great game. I wish I was as hot as Soma Cruz. Anyway, it's not often that I'm in the mood for the massive scope of those games, which is why I appreciate that Super Metroid divides its areas so cleanly, and there is purpose to each one. You can feel yourself improving as you go along. It's because of this that I feel Metroid continued to innovate and reshape its own handling of progression and map structure. In my Metroid Prime video, I commented on the fact that Prime 2 ensured each area would have an elevator or passage to every other area, which cut down on the backtracking that occurred in Metroid Prime as a result of certain areas being disconnected from others, like Phandrana Drifts and Magmoor Caverns. Metroid Fusion, for example, employed a mission-based structure where you explore one area at a time, though you could also find shortcuts between areas all over. But that's a story for another time. The point of all of this is that I could play Super Metroid anytime, anywhere. There's also something to be said about just how amazing it feels to take everything you know about this game and break its intended structure in half. I alluded to this in my discussion of the original Metroid, and bits and pieces of my discussion of this game, but when it all comes together, Super Metroid's path can be surprisingly malleable. For example, let's say you get the early Super Missile and you do end up landing those tight wall jumps to get the Power Bomb early. And you get the Gravity Suit early by clearing out the wrecked ship after jumping with extreme precision. It's hard to overstate just how much the game opens up if you are able to pull these things off. So many doors are now open. The Gravity Suit opens up all underwater and lava-filled areas on its own because you are no longer encumbered when submerged. Your trajectory through the entire game will shift on a dime, and the game won't ever crumble or prevent progress as a result. As I've said, items are the only real progression gates. So long as you can defeat each boss and head to Torian, you are in the clear. When you are good enough at Super Metroid, the game becomes yours to mold to your liking. Pairing this notion with Samus's precise and fluid controls, and it's no wonder this game has become a staple for speedrunners. And the freedom you can achieve when you know what you're doing would inform future Metroid games as well. The only real sore spot with this game I find is Meridia, primarily due to the giant tube in the center that casts a huge divide between its segments, making exploration a bit of a hassle if you're going for 100% completion. But the area is also weird in a fun way. For one thing, the music goes from being quiet and almost somber to being just discordant and bizarre once you ascend from the dark watery areas. There's also secrets buried in quicksand in this area, in places you would never think to check. Even with the X-ray scope equipped, which allows you to spot items and walls based on your own intuition, Meridia still manages to be tricky with its hidden items. I feel Meridia certainly improves with each playthrough though, particularly thanks to its open-ended level design and secrets, but also the fact that memorization can be a blessing. You'll have to backtrack less to get to the other side of Meridia, but the fact that Meridia is even designed this way is annoying to begin with. Meridia also has my least favorite boss in the game. I don't know, I always struggle with this thing's patterns. I end up just tanking damage while firing missiles at it, kinda like the fight with Kraid in NES Metroid. Anyway, with the acquisition of the space jump and later on the screw attack, which both basically allow you to tear through anything that stands in your way, you are all set not just to acquire the rest of the items the game is hiding, but also to have your fated rematch with Ridley in Lower Norfair. This whole area knows outright just how far you've come and aims to push you to your limit before you can even reach Ridley. It also has some familiar elements and set pieces if you've played NES Metroid, and a rematch with the Chozo statue, who you are now able to decimate thanks to your full arsenal. Lower Norfair is a long linear stretch of land that you must traverse and survive if you want to see Ridley and save the baby Metroid. But the build up to that fight makes it feel worthwhile. After all this time, you get to go from being helpless as Ridley kidnaps the baby Metroid to using everything at your disposal and your knowledge from previous battles to actually stand a chance against Ridley. It is heavily reminiscent of the same progression Ripley goes through in the first two Alien films, as both she and Samus are here for some payback in order to rescue and protect someone they care about. It's awesome. This is also a fight that rewards you for having a shitload of missiles saved up, because Ridley has a ton of health. His patterns are designed in a way to make you constantly dodge, track his movements, and still somehow aim in spite of the fact that he is thrusting his tail down from above. All within this vertical shaft that you can barely wall jump or maneuver in while he is there. He is fittingly designed as a hard counter to Samus, which is why taking him down carries the weight of not just your entire playthrough up to that point, but also the fact that you can finally reunite with what was the catalyst for Samus's journey back into Zebes. Or so it seems. In the room that Ridley was guarding, the test tube that the baby Metroid was held captive in has shattered, and the Metroid is nowhere to be found. This means that, once you're ready, the only place left to return to is Torian. The sounds of Torian are somehow even more vile than the original game. It still has that trademark uncomfortable bubbling sound, but it also sounds like you have quite literally entered the belly of the beast, so to speak. It sounds like Zebes is having indigestion, which is thoroughly unpleasant and sickening to listen to, but appropriate given that you are in the home stretch. As mentioned much earlier, the root of all horror, especially in games, is forcing you into a position that you don't want to be in, and yet you must proceed onward. And Torian does this beautifully through its abrasive atmosphere and the fact that you really want to retrieve the baby Metroid. Now it's time for Super Metroid's most crucial sequence. At some point, you'll be removed from the blend of technological and organic life that makes Torian the heart of Zebes, and you'll end up underneath it in a dingy blend of sand and spores. You'll spot a Chozo statue at one point, but it ends up falling into the rest of the sand. An enemy will hop on screen, though you can't hurt it, and all of a sudden, a massive Metroid emerges, which is incredibly startling if you've never played the game before. It drains all of its energy and turns it into a withered husk of what it used to be. And just when you attempt to fight it, it latches onto you and drains you of all of your energy, while you are helpless to do anything. Scripted sequences in games are a given now, but the difference now is that we usually know exactly when we are in one. When Super Metroid has scripted events, they exist to enhance the unknown, and to elicit fear and helplessness, and because they are seamlessly integrated, you won't know when you are in one. And that, to this day, is awesome. As Samus sits on death's door, the Metroid pauses and lifts itself from her head, and the Metroid begins to chirp. The baby Metroid is all grown up, and it once again has recognized Samus as its mother. At this point, it's great to know that you have someone you can rely on, but it's also comforting to know that the baby Metroid is safe. For now. Once again, you descend further into Torian and confront Mother Brain. The structure of the fight is identical to NES Metroid, almost suspiciously so. I mean, after all, each rematch with a villain from the NES version had some twist, and Mother Brain goes down here without a hitch. It's only after the whole lab crumbles that Mother Brain truly shows its teeth. It emerges as a giant hybrid of technological and organic horror, with bloodshot eyes that bulge out of its skull, menacing teeth, and this detailed fleshy body that has prongs and pipes sticking out of it. It is an unimaginably upsetting design for a monster, especially with its expressions, but it is utterly fascinating to look at, emblematic of all of Metroid. All the same, the weak spot is still its brain, so your movement and aiming needs to be on point, just as always. If you manage to survive long enough, Mother Brain will stop playing around and sap nearly all of your energy, salivating as it prepares to deliver the final blow. And just when you think you're about to die, the baby Metroid swoops in and latches itself onto Mother Brain. Watching it drain all of Mother Brain's energy is so satisfying, especially as you're near death, because you've watched this creature go from confused child to the biggest, most threatening Metroid you've ever seen. And after seeing Samus as its mother, it decides to return the favor by saving her life. It transfers all of Mother Brain's energy to Samus, protecting her from Mother Brain by taking the hits for her. Its colors change to these sickly yellow and purple hues as Mother Brain fires at it, and from this point on, you get this gut feeling that the Metroid isn't going to make it. The baby Metroid sacrifices itself to save its mother's life. All music ceases as it dies, and what fades in its place is the same triumphant theme that plays if you ever return to your ship in Crateria, one that embodies Samus Aran. She can ensure that the baby Metroid's death was not in vain. It's quite an emotional conclusion to the relationship between Samus and this Metroid, almost as though you've witnessed her own child give its life as a way of thanking her for everything she's done. Of course, this doesn't mean you're done. You still have to escape from Zebes after all. But in contrast to the original game, you can still do some good here. I mentioned earlier that you'll encounter animals that teach you how to perform certain maneuvers, and if you leave before Zebes blows up, they will die with the planet. You can take an alternate route in Crateria to allow them to escape, reflecting Samus's development since she met the baby Metroid, and paralleling Ripley's desire to head back for Jones the Cat in Alien. The ability to do this, and the game as a whole, paints Samus as more than just a stoic bounty hunter. Super Metroid is very much a story of motherhood and compassion, just as it is a game about Samus blowing shit up. It was this game that solidified her as one of my favorite video game protagonists, as on top of everything she is capable of, her bond with the baby Metroid demonstrates that she too can be fallible. But if she is fallible in having this maternal desire to protect a creature when it has no concept of what it is, as any mother does when their child is born, then let her have that weakness. It just makes me love her even more. I recently spoke with my mom about how becoming a mother changed her priorities and her trajectory through life, all specifically for this video. I'm in my 20s, I'm not married, and I don't have kids. I couldn't possibly understand what it's like to be a parent right now. And I wanted some insight into how Samus was disarmed by that baby Metroid in the midst of her original objective, and why she would do anything to protect it. She told me that once I was born, keeping me alive became her sole focus, and figuring out how to do that was paramount. Everything else was second to her children, including her husband. Yeah, so that means their marriage was likely tested by me being alive. But don't worry, it worked out. They've been married for nearly 30 years. I also asked her what the best and worst parts of being a mom were, and she told me the best part was getting to see me grow into my own person, develop my own personality, seeing how she had an influence on me. On the other hand, the worst part was that once I grew up, she was unable to know about everything that was going on in my life, and that she was unable to protect me from harm and take pain away from me. This made me think about the fact that we don't really ever see the emotion on Samus's face as the baby Metroid gives its life for her. We can only impart our own life experiences onto this storyline, which I think makes video games such a beautiful medium in the first place. Finally, I asked her what being a mom meant to her, and she said it meant loving a person more than you ever thought you could, and that it was the biggest accomplishment in her life. but it was also the scariest thing she'd ever done because she always wanted to do everything she could to protect her children. Being a mother is scary, and yet it is empowering, and it makes you feel like you can do anything. This balance of fear and love feels representative of everything that Metroid stands for. We are fascinated by its creepiness and feel compelled to explore and solve its world despite how abrasive it can be. The same could be said for all horror, but on top of all of this, playing as Samus makes you feel like a badass, like you can do anything. What makes Super Metroid my favorite game in the series is not just its mastery over everything that makes Metroid fun to play, but also the fact that it balances fear and fun through a tale of one of the most harrowing yet rewarding things a person can do. Super Metroid is a tale about a mother and her child, and how Samus navigates some of the most terrifying labyrinths, all for the sake of that child. So when I say that Alien has embedded itself in Metroid, I'm not just talking about the things that inspired its horror-laden setting. I'm also talking about how the core of Ripley's character, and her relationship with Newt, proved foundational for the saga I discussed in this video. In writing this video, I feel like I understood the kind of things my mom had to deal with when raising me, even if in Metroid, these fears are presented in abstract ways. A game I thought I knew so well presented me with yet another revelation all these years later. I wonder what else time will bring. If you'd like to learn more about how I make these videos, I've released a bonus video detailing my process to coincide with this one. I tried to be both comprehensive and succinct, and I feel like it made for a great dive into what goes on in my head when I make these things. I'll also recommend the 2-hour supercut of my Chrono Trigger interviews, which was released back in December. You can find it and much more, including videos from my colleagues King K, Rasputin, and Jacob Geller, exclusively on Nebula. Nebula is a streaming platform created by and for creators, and it is home to many exclusive, ad-free videos, including video essays, documentaries, narrative fiction, and a whole lot more. You directly support creators by signing up and watching videos on Nebula, and in doing so, you'll be able to enjoy videos at least 24 hours before they go up anywhere else, including mine, which always go up early on Nebula, as well as other exclusives like bonus videos, extended cuts, and Nebula originals like Jetlag, which chronicles the travel adventures of a group of friends wherein they take part in challenges akin to playground games all over the world. I find the series to be super comforting these days, and it stands as one of many originals and exclusives the platform has to offer. You'll also regularly obtain guest passes whilst being subscribed, once per month for monthly subscribers, and 3 per quarter for annual and lifetime subscribers. So you can have friends or family members take the plunge as well. Nebula has been amazingly supportive of me, and they've enabled me to continue creating videos about the things I love. If you'd like to support me directly and take advantage of the things Nebula has to offer, then you can use my link, go.nebula.tv/LiamTriforce, to get 40% off an annual subscription. That's $36 a year, or just $3 a month. You can also purchase a lifetime subscription to Nebula that lasts, well, a lifetime for $300. Thanks for your consideration. I've been Liam Triforce. Thanks for watching.